Hey guys, my name is Larry and welcome to Military Stories. This week I'm going to be talking about Ranger School, start to finish, my whole experience, each phase, and a couple stories within each phase from when I went through. I did a poll on my channel this past week of what you guys would like to hear, about more combat stories, Ranger School, or stories about my life, and only a few of you voted, but Ranger School was a popular vote, so that's what I'm going to be talking about today. This past week we've had a bunch of new subscribers. Thank you. I appreciate the support. I love reading the comments about your experiences, people you know that served, or similar experiences to what I had, and I really enjoy reading the comments and seeing all of you follow along. I appreciate that. This last week I did a video on weapons caches, so if you didn't catch that video, make sure you check that out. I'll put a link right here. And also, I've talked about Ranger School before. I did 5 tips to pass Ranger School, and I will do a link for that as well. So make sure you check out those videos if you haven't yet. So if you're new here, you can expect every week I do a long video of military stories from my life, things I went through while deployed, things I went through while stateside in the Army infantry, and what it was like getting out of the military. I was a private security contractor. I'll talk about that at some point. So that's what you can expect. A long video each week about that, and then I usually chop that up into a few shorts. Upcoming, once I get to like 300 subs or so, I think I'll talk about my life. Some of you have asked to hear about, what was your life like overall. So like I'll talk about my childhood, and then, like my Army career as a whole. I'll talk about that at some point. And then, once I get, to like 500, maybe I'll do a live stream where people can ask me questions and, other story ideas. So that's what I'm planning to do in the future. I still have a lot of military deployment stories I want to talk about. And like I said, stories about my life, contracting, stuff like that. And also on this channel, I'm not really taking a political stance about why we were there, the reasons for going into these countries. I'm just telling my perspective as a soldier. We joined in the 2000s. I joined in 2004. 9/11 happened in 2001, and a lot of people wanted to serve our country at that time, just anything to support our country, to serve our country. And that's all I was doing. That's all the guys left and right of me were doing. We just wanted to serve our country. So on this channel, I'm not really taking any political stance of why we were there, or if it was for the right reasons. But I know when we were there, we were doing good every day. We were trying to do good. We were watching out to the guys that left and right of us, and basically doing what we're told to a point, and trying to get bad guys out of the area, trying to help the country. And I'm just talking about my experiences in the military. I feel like these stories need to be told. I've looked for information about these stories previously, and it's hard for me to find anything about the events that happened, stories I've gone through, people that were killed, my friends that were killed or injured, and there's nothing online about that stuff. And so I feel like these stories need to be told. Subscribers, people that are here, pay attention to the community tab. I like to post polls and ideas for upcoming videos, and so pay attention to that tab on the channel so that I can get your feedback on what stories you would like to hear, and ideas you have, questions about upcoming videos. All right, get into the story. Ranger School. So Ranger School was conceived in 1950 during the Korean War. It was originally like an infantry training school, and then it became what is known today as Ranger School. It's open to all branches of the Army, of the military. Army, Marine, Navy, Air Force, Space Force, and also select students from other countries can come to the United States and go through our Ranger School. It's considered one of the toughest schools that the military has to offer. It's got a very high attrition rate. Only 50% or so make it through. It used to be even lower. It fluctuates every year, 40 to 50% pass rate, and the number is even lower for those that make it all the way through their first time without recycling. And when I went through with a couple of foreign soldiers. There was a soldier from Qatar, there was a soldier from Guam, and a couple other countries that I don't remember, but there was, different countries that send their best guys to come to the United States to go through Ranger School, and then they get to go back to their country with that Ranger tab. And it's a leadership school. It's a a suck fest. It's not fun. It's hard. It's challenging. You have to get put into leadership positions while you have minimal sleep, minimal food. You're tired. You're missing home, and it's grueling. And then you have to lead soldiers to do infantry tactics, raids, ambush, movement to contact, and do all these field tactics while tired, hungry. And so, I went through in 2007. I had already deployed to Iraq one time. I deployed in 2005 to 2006 for a year, and then we were back for a year. And within a couple months of being home, we knew we were going to deploy again. We're going back to Iraq in 2008, early 2008. So I knew, I only had a year home. And my original plan was to go Special Forces. I wanted to go to Army Special Forces. I want to do something better with my career. I had liked the Army Infantry. I had gained rank. I had been doing well, and I wanted to go into Special Forces. So for Special Forces, you have to go to selection, and in order to go to selection, you have to pass a medical physical. So I got all the stuff done, the paperwork done, the packing list. I was ready to go, and the last step was the medical. And as I did my blood test, it said I was anemic, and that just means like you have low white blood cell count. I mean, that could have been because of the amount of training we were doing, my diet. I don't really think, and I'm not anemic to this day. So anyway, I failed that test to get in, and then a couple months later, we're sitting there in our regular Army Infantry platoon where we went out to the field, we're training, and one day they're like, hey, who wants to go to Ranger School? And I remember my dad always said, if they ever offer schools, you shoot your hand up quick. And I remember my dad saying that. And so when they asked who would like to go to Ranger School, only a few guys from each platoon raised their hand, because, who wants to volunteer to go through this hardest school in the military, one of the hardest schools. But I knew that if I made it through that, it would help my career. It's be challenging for myself, and it's something I wanted to do. So when they asked, I raised my hand. They're like, all right, Larry, you're going. Anybody else? And two other guys from my platoon, they selected to go with. So we had to meet down and Benning. We had to train up. We had to make sure we could meet the physical requirements to go. We had to make sure that we were good soldiers. We didn't have any disciplinary actions against us. So you have to meet certain requirements to be able to go. You have to go through like certain amount of pre-training before you can go. Most people go to like RAP or RASP, which is like Ranger Assessment Program or Ranger Assessment Selection Program. They'll go through that before they get to Ranger School. And the Ranger Battalion guys, they have to go through that. They go through RASP or RAP to get to Ranger Battalion. And then once they're in Ranger Battalion, after they've been there for like a year, then they get selected to go to Ranger School. So you have to go to RASP or RAP to get to Ranger Battalion, but they're not tabbed.
They have a scroll on their left side.
That is the battalion they're in, their Ranger Battalion, but they're not tabbed yet. And then after they've earn their keep in the Ranger Battalion, then they send them to Ranger School, and when they get back, they're tabbed, and that's usually when they become an NCO, a non-commissioned officer. So they'll probably be a E1 to E4 going through Ranger Battalion, and then they'll get selected to go to Ranger School. After they pass, then they become a sergeant, and if you don't pass, then you get kicked out of Ranger School. I don't think they'll give you a chance to go again. If you don't make it, I don't think you're going to be in Ranger Battalion anymore. But me, I was in a regular infantry unit, and so it's even harder to go to Ranger School. It's luck. If they asked for volunteers one time while I was in, they asked for volunteers to go. One time, my company got slots to go, and most 82nd Airborne, 101st, and like the other one in Italy, I forgot the name of it. Those guys usually get most of the slots because those are like the most known light infantry units. Me, I was in 4th ID, which was mechanized, and it was very rare for any of us to get selected to go to Ranger School. So when that opportunity came, I rose my hand. So like I said, I went with two guys. One guy met us down there, and I drove with my other buddy. He was attached to our company as a forward observer, and that'll become into play in a little bit when I talk about the land nav. But he went with me, and so we drove from Texas to Benning. We had to be there on a report date, and we drove in my car to Fort Benning. And I remember stopping in like random cities along the way, and it was an interesting trip to get there. But you get there with your car, and it's locked away. You don't get to see your car until the end of the school. You have no time off except for in between the first and second phase. You get like a half a day off to do laundry and stuff, call home. But you don't get nights or weekends off. You're locked down for that whole time. So I went with this guy. He was a forward observer, and I'll mention it when we go through land nav that he didn't quite make it through. So the first phase when you get there is Benning phase or jungle phase. That is located at Fort Benning, Georgia. and that is, it's always been the spot for Ranger School. That's where the Army Infantry Basic Training was. So when I went to Army Infantry Basic Training, it was also at Fort Benning, so I had been there before. So the first night you get there, you know, you're kind of nervous. You show up, you report to a building, and they tell you where to go to the barracks, and you show up with your bag, the packing list, your duffel bag, and your rucksack, and you go into the barracks. And I remember getting in there, and all these guys are kind of sitting in there, and we didn't know what to expect. You know, we knew the next morning we were going to be starting Ranger School, so it was very nerve-wracking that first night. You know, you didn't know what you were about to get into. So next morning, 0400, they come running in, they're yelling, they're like, get up, let's go, get your PT uniform on, let's go. So everybody's hustling, they're getting up, they're throwing all their clothes on, and we run outside, and it's pitch black outside. You know, it's 4 o'clock in the morning, and there's this big field with all these Ranger instructors out there yelling, get over here, you know, make a line, get over here. It's just chaos, almost like my first day of basic training. It was chaos. Everybody's yelling, screaming. So they have you do each phase of the PT test. That's the very first thing they do, because they want to make sure you're in enough physical shape to get through the school. So they do the push-ups, and so you get in line, you do the push-ups, and these push-ups are very strict. They have a guy with like a fist on the ground, and you have to go all the way down, your chest touches fist, and then you have to go all the way out and lock out. And if you don't do the exact proper form, that'll keep repeating the number. So I remember a couple of mine, I was like 3, and he's like 3, and he's like 3, he's like, lock out. And they start calling you Ranger. But the moment you started to start calling you Ranger, like, lock out, Ranger, let's go, Ranger. And so I did it. You know, I believe it's 47. In my other video, I talk about all the physical requirements, but I believe it's 47 push-ups. And then you do the sit-ups. Same thing, very strict. You have to have your hands behind your head, elbows past your knees, and I believe that was like 52 or something. So I did that. Then you go over to the pull-ups. And the pull-ups, that's different than normal Army. You know, normal Army, you have to do push-ups, sit-ups, run. You don't do pull-ups. So in Ranger School, you have to do pull-ups. So you get up on the bar, and I believe you can do underhand or overhand, and there's a Ranger instructor standing right in front of you. And so each time you do a pull-up, you know, chin above the bar, fully locked out, and the guy is standing in front of you so that you can't sway, like you can't use your legs to kick, because if you touch him, he'll tell you to get down and start over. So can't touch the guy standing in front of you. They have to be perfect form, all the way out, all the way up. Only 6 though, you know, 6 to get in, which is kind of crazy. You do 6 to get in, and then for the rest of the school, every time you go to the chow hall to eat, there's pull-up bars outside. You would have to say the Ranger Creed, which is like R-A-N-G-E-R, is like a paragraph for each. I don't even remember it. It's like, recognize that I volunteered as a Ranger, fully knowing the hazards of my chosen profession. I will, you know, and then it goes on and on, acknowledging, and you have to say that before you go in, and then you have to go to the pull-up bar. You have to do 6 pull-ups every time before you go eat chow. So by the end of it, you become a pull-up machine, because you do it multiple times a day throughout the entire school. So pull-ups, pass. Once everybody's passed those events, then you go do the run. So the run is a 5-mile run, and it's in the terrain is like hills, and it's not easy. And I don't think I had run 5 miles timed in my entire life. You know, in the infantry Army, we run all the time, but I'm not quite sure it was 5 miles at the pace we had to run. But you start running, right? And there's a guy in the very back who's a Ranger instructor, and he has like a different color vest on and a flashlight. It's still dark out, and when you run, you just have to make sure you stay in front of the last guy. And that comes into play also with the ruck march. Like, there's a guy that does the minimum standard exactly 40 minutes on the run, just like the ruck march. And so as long as you stay in front of that last guy, you're going to pass. So I remember running, man, and I was getting tired. I was barely hanging on, and I saw that last guy back there, and I was like, you know, that helped me pick up my speed a little bit. So, you know, I passed the run. You know, as long as you pass that last guy, you know, you'll make it. So after that, then you know, everybody's done with the PT test part. You go back to like the barracks area, and then starts the impossible time hacks. I mean, they say, you know, you got 5 minutes to go inside, get all your gear, bring it all outside, take out your uniforms, lay it out, have your uniforms laid out, your boots laid out, and you got 5 minutes, go. And then everybody's running frantically. They're running inside. You know, the night before, I just put my bag under there. I shoved all my stuff in there. I had no idea where my uniforms were. So I'm grabbing it. I'm running outside and dumping my stuff out. And right away, guys are like halfway out. And they're like, get down. You know, guys are start doing push-ups and, you know, sit-ups, smoke fest before, you can't even, it's impossible time hacks. That's the whole motive, is you're not going to make it. You're not going to do what they asked in that amount of time. It's just an excuse to smoke you. So you start, push-ups, flutter kicks, all kinds of stuff. And, that was the only real time I really considered quitting, was that very first day, because I had done the run, I'd done the PT test, and then now I was getting treated like the first day of basic training again. I'd already been in the Army. I had gotten promoted. I was an E4. I had been through a deployment. I had seen combat. I have had friends killed. I have been blown up. And then now I'm sitting here getting yelled at like I'm a child again. I'm like, man, I don't need this. I'm missing home. It's like, what am I really doing here? Do I really, want to go through this just to get this tab? And so that first day was a real gut check. It's like, do I really want to be doing this? And I almost quit, because it's like, man, I was sucking, I was sweating, and I'm like, man, as if it's going to be 62 days like this, no thanks. But I didn't quit. I started thinking of my fiance back home. I thought of like my dad. I didn't want to let down. I didn't want to let my fiance down. And for myself, I was like, I can do this, man. I know I can do this. I always wanted to go to some type of special forces selection program, and I knew that I could pass. So we're out there. We finally get that time hack done, and then now like starts the sewing and tying stuff down. And I didn't really, they said sewing kit was on the packing list, but I had never really practicing sewing before, so I kind of really don't know what I'm doing. You have to put your name tags on your rucksack. You put cat eyes on there, which is like little glowing reflective tape. And so I'm doing that, and then they're like, tie your stuff down. You need to use a certain kind of knot to tie things together. Like you have to, I can't remember exactly, you have to tie your rucksack like to your frame. Later on, you have to tie your weapon to yourself so you don't lose it. It's all these tie downs. And this is one of the tips I talked about, was befriend people, because I had no idea how to do knots. But a lot of these guys had just come from RAP, or RAS, Ranger Selection Program, and they do tons of knots there. So I had to ask the guy next to me, like, hey dude, I'm sorry, but can you help me with these knots? And he showed me, or sewing, like, what do we got to do? And so I remember at that time, like, asking people around me for help. And it's crucial that, if you need help, ask a buddy, and then one day they might ask you. So anyway, I made it through that. I talked about the packing list in my 5 tips, and the packing list is huge. If you're missing an item, they'll scream at you. I mean, I think they even recycle some guys. If you don't have everything you need, then you get recycled already, which means you got to wait for the next class to start, which is usually a month from now, which means you stay there and you just do extra duty all day long. You're picking up garbage, you're going out to the range and picking up brass. You're just doing all these odd end jobs, and it stinks. You're all day long of just crap jobs. You don't want to get recycled. So guys already are getting recycled, or you go home. If you don't want to stay, you go home. So if you don't have everything on the packing list, you're either going to go home. If it's a minor thing, they might just smoke you for an hour and let you stay. Anyway, get through that day. And then the second day is land nav. Same thing, that first night you go into the barracks. Now you've already experienced one day, you rack out, it was late at night, you go to bed finally. I think it was like 10, 11 o'clock at night. And first night they have guys on fire watch, so guys that have to stay awake in the barracks, and you rotate so that there's somebody awake at all times, making sure, it's called fire watch, but you're just kind of watching the area to make sure, in a combat zone, that you're not getting attacked, no enemy is coming to your area, or there's no fires being started that you can that somebody would get injured. So somebody's on fire guard at all times, and guys are already like falling asleep in the middle of the night when they're supposed to be awake. It's hard. You're already tired. Anyway, 4 o'clock, they wake you up. Actually, I think it was 3:30. They wake you up. You go out to do the land nav, which is the second day, which is a big killer. And you start at 3:30 in the morning, so that it's like, I believe, 4 hours long. So 2 hours of it is in the dark, and then the sun starts to come up, so the last 2 hours are in daytime. You get there, and they give you a piece of paper that has 5 points on it. And you have to find 4 out of the 5 points in the time frame, which is 4 hours. And all they do is give you a grid for each point. They give you a map. They give you a compass. And then you brought a compass with you, and a flashlight, a red flashlight that, you can only use red lens on your Army flashlight to look at your map. And I believe you have to like kneel down or cover yourself. In the field, you got to cover yourself with like a poncho and look at your map. You can't be caught looking at your map without being covered, but I think for the land nav, it didn't really matter as much. But so they give you your points, and I remember starting to walk, and I'm looking at the map, and there's like little trails and roads that are on the map. And most people just started walking. They find their point, they mark it on the map, and they just start walking right for their point using a compass, azimuth, and your map. But me, I was like, all right, so I see my point here. I see like this little trail on the map that goes over here. So if I go this way, and then I see like a little ravine, and if I go to that point and then turn and go like 200 meters to the right, then I should be close to my point. So use common sense on the land nav. I mean, so the other guy I went with that failed, first things first, everybody just starts walking. And this guy, first thing, he's like, shooting azimuth, he's writing it down, he's got a protractor, he's like trying to do exact lines. And, if you try to get that specific with it, you're gonna like confuse yourself or be too technical. You gotta use common sense. Look at the area, look at the terrain, look at trails on the map. And so this guy ended up failing. He only found like 2 out of his 5 points in the 4 hours, and he was a FO, a forward observer, who's supposed to specialize in land navigation because he's the one calling in airstrikes. He's a forward observer or artillery. So I'm walking, I'm finding my points, and I remember I was getting close to one of my first points, and I see a couple ranger students over by another point, and I'm like, I don't think that's my point, but I can see them. There's a post out of the ground that's like this high, and it's got like a little clipboard hanging from it, and I see like 2 guys over there with their flashlights looking at their stuff. So once they leave, they said you can't talk to each other, you can't be close to each other, or you're get in trouble and you fail. So I waited till one guy left, another guy was like waiting off in the woods, then he went up and then he left. So I went over there and I look at it and I pull up the clipboard and it says the grid. And so I look at the grid, I look at my map, I'm like, crap, this isn't my point. I'm like, I'm 200 meters over this way. So I used that to see where I was at, and then all right, I need to go northwest. Then I use my compass, I need to go northwest, 200 meters, and then I should be close to my point. So I walk, 200 meters, I get to my point, and so I look at it. You have your own sheet of paper, and then there's a clipboard. So I signed them. Oh no, I'm sorry. There was a clipboard, and then you have your own sheet of paper. I signed the clipboard, and then walked off. I continued on. Cool. I found my first point. Next point was like probably 3 clicks away. That's like, I think 3,000 meters. I'll have to look at the exact distance and put it on here, but I forget. It's been so long. But it was like 3 clicks away, and so I'm walking. You're going through all this different type of terrain, up and down hills, through woods, thick stuff, and I get to my next point, and I get it. Cool. I get kind of close to where I was, and I actually found this spot. I get to my third point, or maybe it was the second point. I get to my second point, and I see a guy that's ahead of me, and right after he was done, he grabbed this thing that was hanging and he clipped his piece of paper. He punched it, and the guy started walking. I was like, hey, looked around. I was like, hey, why did you punch your thing? And he's like, you got to sign it, and you got to punch your card that you were there. And there's like a certain pattern. That this post has like a 3 button or a 3 hole, and then there's like the last one had 2. And I was like, what? I was like, I didn't know you had to punch it and sign it. So I'm thinking, I'm like, crap, I don't know if my first point technically counted because I didn't punch my card. I just signed the clipboard. So now I'm all worried. I'm like, crap, now do I keep going, or do I go back to that other point, which took me 25 minutes to get from there to here? Do I go back? But my next point was north more. So man, I started getting worried right away. But so I continued on my next point, found it. I continued on to my 4th point, which is technically only my 3rd because I didn't clip the first one. I guess my 4th point, signed it, and now I got like 45 minutes. I got 45 minutes till time is up. My 5th point is continuing further away, and then it goes back to the beginning, so it's like almost like a giant circle. So I'm like, do I go to my 5th point, which I don't know where it is, try to find it, or do I go back to my first point and clip that clipboard? So I was like, man, I didn't want to take the chance of not being able to find my 5th point. So I ran frantically all the way back to the first point, and I'm running through the woods. I remember I'm like freaking out, like I'm not going to pass. I'm like getting cut up by branches. I'm running. I remember there was like a spider suspended from a tree. I almost ran into this giant banana spider. It was like this high, and I almost ran right into it. I'm like, holy crap. It's like this big blue spider that they have down there in Georgia in the mountains. Scared the heck out of me. But anyway, made it all the way back to my first point and clipped my thing like I was supposed to, and then hiked back in to the start with like 20 minutes to spare. And so I made it. There were some guys already there. You know, they're sitting down, they're changing their boots, or changing their socks, I mean, sitting down, and like, I made it. I passed the point. So I was really excited about that. But man, I was freaking out when I was like, I had a dilemma. Do I go find that 5th point or run it all the way back to the beginning? So passed the land nav. The other guy I was with, he failed the land nav. He, I don't know what he was doing. And then so then they give you one more chance. The next morning, if you don't pass land nav, you get one more chance, and he failed again. So that guy got sent home on like the 3rd day. And I forgot to mention, the very first guy I went with, he got sent home on the run. He didn't pass the run. So now it's the 3rd day, and both guys I came with are gone. It's just me left. And so the next event, the next order of events, I don't remember exactly how they happened, but they had a shuttle run that you had to do with all your uniform on, your boots, and it was 2 miles. And I remember you have to do that with a buddy, and you run, and you like have to go over like logs, like a slight obstacle course, uphill, downhill, and that was a struggle for me. Running 2 miles with boots on was a struggle. I remember I was the guys almost had to wait for me a couple times. He was like big, tall dudes that were just booking it, and it was a struggle for me to keep up. And then the next day we did we did the obstacle course at Ranger Base. So they have an obstacle course there, a smaller one, and then they have a big one called the Darby Clean. So there you have like where you run, you go through tunnels, you go under barbed wire, you go on monkey bars where it's all wet, and if you fall into the water, you have to start that over until you can make it through. You have to climb up a huge net and down. You have to like climb up a rope and touch the top and come down. And so Matt Hughes, the UFC fighter, he showed up and he came to the Ranger School to this was 2007, and he was an active UFC fighter at that time. And so he came and was talking to us, trying to motivate us, and he went through the course, and the Ranger instructors were like smoking this guy. This guy's in great physical shape, but the Ranger instructors were showing him like how, you got to be in a certain type of shape to pass these courses. But so I remember doing that, and the next morning we start ground fighting. This is 3 days of ground fighting, grappling. You do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. They teach you the basics, chokes. They teach you, how to basically wrestle somebody and pin somebody if you ever had to get in hand-to-hand combat while you're in combat, So they pair you up with people. They would say like 5 minutes, go, and you would start fighting, and whoever would submit the other guy, then you would start over. And man, it was grueling. It was this huge pit. It was like shredded tires, and we would just rotate. You'd fight one guy for 5 minutes, and they like blow the whistle. You go to another guy, you fight him as hard as you can for 5 minutes. I mean, these are guys that are motivated, in shape, and I'm like one of the smaller guys. I'm getting my butt whooped half the time. They don't care who you're going up against. I'm going up against a guy that's 100 pounds heavier than me, and we have to fight your life off until one guy is choking the other guy out. And so I had to fight these guys that were bigger than me, and man, it was not fun. I did not like that time. It was good learning the ground fighting and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu tactics, but I would really struggle. I was one of the smaller guys. It was getting my butt kicked a lot. But and Matt Hughes started it all. Matt Hughes sat, and I remember we all got in a circle. He's like, everybody get down, sit nut to butt. Sorry if that's offensive, but what that means is you sit like cross-legged right in front of the next guy, where you're almost touching him, and you crowd in there because there's like 300 of us. Crowd in there around a circle, and Matt Hughes in the middle. He's like, hey guys, thanks for coming to Ranger School. I'm going to teach you guys some basic stuff. And they showed him wrestling and showing, I wonder if it's going to rain. But so we're doing the ground fighting, right? All of a sudden they say, all right, get on your knees and face your opponent. So, and it said, close your eyes, put your hands behind your head, face your opponent. And so all of a sudden they come walking around and they put a taser in you or your opponent's pocket. They say, open your cargo pockets, put your hands behind your head, kneel down, and close your eyes. And they walk around and they put a taser in one of your pockets. And you can kind of feel it if they put it in yours, or sometimes they would touch you and make it seem like it's in yours and put it in the other guy. And they would say, all right, fight. So you would have to fight each other, and one guy's got a taser. And so you're fighting, you're going at it, and you either take yours out and tase the guy, or the other guy's trying to take it out of your pocket, or so you're fighting, and you go until one of you guys get tased. And the Ranger instructors are walking around, and when they see a guy get tased pretty good, they're like, all right, stop, start over, hands behind your head, and then you go at it again. So literally a couple hours of fighting each other with tasers in our pockets. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I got tased. I'll be honest, a couple times I kind of faked it. Like, they would hit the button, and I'd be like, ooh, and it wasn't really getting me, but you're getting stinking tased, and I'm like, no thanks. So I kind of made a a little big deal of it sometimes. I didn't want to keep getting tased. I got the best of a couple of guys, but mostly I was getting my butt kicked. I remember wrestling with one guy that was from another country, and I don't remember what country he's from, and we're wrestling, and he's like, hey, he's like, you don't have to go 100%. And I'm like, okay, I won't. And so we're like wrestling around, and, you know, the RIs walk around, they're like, good job, you know, and we're not really going 100%. We're like, yeah, you know, because we're tired of fighting each other, and it hurts. And and there's one point they let you do open hand slap, so you're not punching each other, but you're fighting, but you can slap the other one. So we're like fighting and slapping each other, and you know, tasers, you know, guys are bleeding, getting bloody noses, and it's not fun. I choose to not fight if I can. But so you get through that, and you know what's crazy is the guys that failed land nav, they're going through land nav again, and we're sitting here fighting all day long from the sun up to sundown. You're in this pit fighting nonstop, and you're getting smoked. You have to like drag your buddy. They're like, you grab around his neck and crawl around I mean, it's just a complete smoke fest. They're trying to get people to quit. They're trying to make people not want to be there anymore. So then one of the next days you go to the Darby Queen, which is their patented obstacle course, which is like a 2-mile course of all like 20 different obstacles, maybe more or less. I'll have to put it on here how many obstacles, but that was challenging. It was mostly fun because you just have your uniform on, boots, you don't have anything else, so you feel kind of lightweight. You're not carrying a rucksack or anything. But I remember there was like this buddy tower where there was like 4 levels, and you have to go with your buddy, and you have to like lift him up, then he's got to pull you up, then you climb to the next one, and it's like 10 feet to the next spot, so you have to like have him help you to get up there, pull yourself up, and then you have to pull your other buddy up. So you get through the obstacle course. If you don't pass it, you have to go through again, and then if you don't pass it again, you recycle, or you get kicked out, you get sent home. Then one of the next days you go to the pond. It's like Ranger Pond, and this is like a whole morning, like 5 hours spent at the pond. You go there, and this is like the infamous Ranger Pond. They do the graduation ceremony there also. But so you have to go, you get in the water. I'm sorry, you climb this pole, you have to crawl across and touch, there's like a box, you walk across, and there's a box you have to walk over, and like at the top, they'll stop you and say, stop, Ranger, what's the Ranger creed, or what's the first, you have to like, recognize a volunteer as a Ranger. At the top of this, you're like, you know, 25 feet in the air above the water on this little tiny platform, standing there shaking, and you know, and then you keep going, and you have to get down on this rope. I'm sure you people have seen, I'll post a picture of guys going across this rope, and then you have to hit the Ranger tab, you hang, and you're like 25 feet above the water, and he asks you another question. All right, what is, you know, the second creed of the Ranger, or what is, you know, the maximum shooting range of M16 or something, and until you answer the question correctly, they'll say, all right, drop, Ranger. So you let go, and you fall, and you hit the water. I mean, you're falling high. I remember hitting that water like, ow, that kind of hurt. My legs were kind of spread open a little bit when I hit the water. So then you get out, and then they put all this gear on you. You have your LCE with like your ammo pouches and canteen pouches. They give you a weapon, and they have you jump in the water, swim, keeping your weapon out of the water. This is where a side stroke comes in handy. If you haven't practiced side stroke, maybe practice that before you go. You do a side stroke with your weapon out of the water, and then they take the weapon and they tell you to go underwater, take off all your gear, and then don't come back up until you do that. So you have to go underwater, remove all your gear, and then come back up. And once you pass that part, then you have to go over to this giant tower to do the final zip line into the water. And I remember they're like, we're hustling, there's 300 of us, so, or there's a little less by now, we lost some guys, like maybe 200, but I remember climbing up this tower, like the highest tower I've ever climbed in my life, and it's wet, guys above you, I'm right behind the guy above me, he's dripping water on you all the way down, the bars are slippery. This is the tallest tower I've ever climbed in my life, and it's slipping. I mean, I was actually scared, like, if I fall, so I remember getting all the way to the top, and there's a ranger instructor sitting up there, and he's like, soldier, where are you from? I'm like, Fort Hood, Texas. He's like, what the heck are you doing here? He's like, you're not from Ranger Battalion. What are you doing here? I'm like, I just wanted to go to the school. He's like, well, he's like, welcome to Ranger School or something. I hope you're enjoying yourself. He's like, all right, get down that zip line. So you sit, grab this zip line. Again, you're wet, grabbing this metal handle. It's wet from the previous guy, and you're 100 feet in the air, and you go down this zip line. There's a guy on the bottom, and he does a flag wave, and then you let go and you go into the water, and you have to put your feet out straight, and you launch yourself into the water. And some guys wouldn't do it correctly, hit the water and face plant. Some guys would do it back and hit their back, and it was pretty scary going all the way down, but I did it pretty good on my feet out. I hit the water good, and it went well, but it was a little scary. So then the first week of Ranger School is called Hell Week, and you go through all that stuff that I just mentioned. The attrition, that's where you lose most of the guys, is that first week. Probably 100 guys to the PT test, land nav, obstacle course, people quitting, people failing. That first week is the hardest, Hell Week. And that whole week, you're getting like 4 hours or less of sleep. You're only eating twice a day. And half the time, you're only getting a few minutes to eat, so you don't even get to eat all your food. And then at the end after you've been there for that week, then you go out to the field. And this is when you start learning field tactics. This is where you learn how to be a ranger. This is first a suck vest, and now you got to go out and learn infantry tactics, how to be a ranger, and be a leader. So you go out to the field, and you're given like 2 MREs a day. You got a rucksack, and you have to carry all your gear. Our rucksacks weighed anywhere from 60 to 90 pounds. You know, we never weighed them, but they were so heavy that most of the time you had to sit down, put your rucksack on, and then stand up. It was that heavy. Like, you could not just lift it off the ground and put it on. But you do classes every day. You're out in the field, and they teach you, you know, ambush, raid, movement to contact. And then you start doing patrols. And each patrol, they assign people. They'll call your roster number, you know, roster number 131. All right, you are platoon leader for the next 24 hours. So that means you're acting as like a lieutenant, platoon leader, in charge of that platoon. So you have to be in charge of your movement, where you're going, how your operation is going to run. You're in charge of your platoon, 30 guys. And there's a guy, all right, 161, you're a platoon sergeant. You're in charge of men, weapons, and equipment. You're making sure you have all your guys, all your equipment. Whenever you set up patrol base, you're in charge of patrol base operations. So, and then there's a guy that's like assigned to the radios, like FTO, you're assigned to radio. So there's 3 assignments, and every 24 hours it changes. And then that's how you get graded. You get graded on if you're going to pass your patrol or fail your patrol, and it's based on how well you perform, if you can get control of your guys, if you accomplish the mission, if you don't lose any gear. So when you go out to the field, 2 MREs, and you have your canteens. They give you like iodine drops. So you actually have to scoop your canteen out of the water and put iodine drops in it out of river water. So all the water you drink is from rivers, and they give you iodine. So that's pretty crazy. I remember one time we set up, and I fell asleep against a tree. They're like, all right, set up your little hooch for the night. A lot of times you would just set up a little poncho up against a tree, and I didn't even do that. I was so tired, I just leaned up against a tree and fell asleep. Then I woke up the next day, and I had chiggers all in my head, and like I was like itching like crazy. And I go to the medic comes around each morning and checks your feet and sees how you're doing. And I told him my head's itching like crazy. I had this red rash on my head. And he's like, you got chiggers, dude, which is like little tiny bugs that are embedded in your skin, and it sucks. It's like the itchiest thing ever. And so they gave me like some drops for that to put on my head, and that kind of sucked. And then, you know, I got poison ivy during that phase. I had it on my hands and my legs and my groin, so I was constantly itching. And you're not showering. You're nasty. You're dirty. You stink. Everybody starts to smell like ammonia, like the worst body smell ever. Everybody stinks. And so I had the poison ivy, the chiggers, and then there was one story where I lost my gear. So we did this raid setup where you're walking through the field sometimes, and all of a sudden you hear, it's an arty sim, like a artificial simulation round.
There's a swamp down there.
And it's really loud. It sounds like a real grenade. But every once in a while, the ranger instructors will throw this grenade, and what you do is you drop to the ground. That means incoming. Then you say like contact 200 meters front. So you drop all your gear and you start bounding. You start moving. You're going to attack the objective where you're getting contact from. So we're doing that, and then like you get down, and like the leader will be like, all right, second squad, I need you to flank right. So you laying down contact, second squad flanks right, and then they're like, all right, we're in position. All right, cease fire. And these guys start bounding, assaulting the objective. They're bounding one by one, running, diving in the dirt, shooting, and they're bounding. And so we do this whole mission, and everybody's assigned their weapon, their gear, and Claymore around, like a rocket launcher AT4, but I was assigned a Claymore. So in all the hustle, the Claymore fell out of my bag, and so we gather up. All right, mission complete. Let's pack up and move on. So it's the platoon sergeant and the platoon leader's job to check everybody's. We have all our people, we have all our equipment, and so we gather up, like, you got all your stuff? Yeah, everybody's tired, we're all breathing heavy. We just did this huge objective that lasted like an hour. I'm like, all right, let's move out. So we move out, and we get to the next spot. Like, we walked for like probably 2 hours to get to the next spot where our patrol base setup was going to be. We started checking our equipment, and I realized I didn't have my Claymore. They're like, dude, we assigned you this Claymore. Where is it? I'm going through my stuff. I'm ripping it all out. You sure you didn't give it to somebody else? I'm like, no, I don't have my Claymore. And I was like, dude, I think I left it back at that last spot. And I can't remember if I was a leader or not, because they asked me, they were like, you want to go back and get it, or you want to become a failure? And I was like, well, can we go back and get it? So we get up, and everybody's like, oh, come on, man, come on. And so we go walk all the way back, and we find my Claymore sitting there in the ground, and we put it back in the bag, and we walk all the way back, and everybody was kind of upset with me for a little bit. But, mistakes happen. People make mistakes, and there's stuff like that. It happens a few times. Rangers get guys lost. Rangers fall asleep. They lose gear. It's happened to me. It happened to me later on while I was a leader. That's why I can't remember if I was a leader at that time or not. But it happened to me one time where somebody fell asleep or lost their gear later on. So you go through the field. You pass your patrols. I passed my patrols on this one. I had pretty good control of my guys. And you're twice. You have to be a platoon sergeant and a platoon leader, and you have to pass each one. And so I passed those, and then you graduate, or you get through Benning phase. So then you get like a half a day to go. Get to go into the Fort Benning town. You get like 6 hours to where you get to go wash your gear, go eat some regular food, call home. I remember calling my platoon sergeant, and I'm like, because you have to let them know that you're still there. So I call my platoon sergeant. I'm like, hey, this is Larry. I just want to let you know I'm still at Ranger School. And he's like, Larry? He's like, what are you still doing there? And I'm like, yeah, man, I made it. I'm still here. And he's like, awesome, man, good for you. He's like, your other two buddies made it back. They're back here. He's like, I'm glad you're still there. Good job. I remember calling my dad. I didn't talk to my dad in a little while. And I called my dad. I was like, hey, Dad, I just want to let you know I just made it through the first phase of Ranger School. And he didn't even know I was there. He was like, what? He's like, I didn't even know you were there. Because I didn't want to tell him until I at least made it through one phase. I'm not going to be like, yeah, I'm going to Ranger School, and then fail out. And then, I don't want to be that guy. So I called my dad. My dad was happy. And I called my fiance, of course. She was super happy. And so yeah, that was first phase. That was Benning phase. So this video went a little long, so I'm gonna break this up. I'll talk about mountain phase next, and stories involved in that, and then I'll talk about Florida phase, stories involved in that, and Florida phase, swamps, zodiacs, riding on boats, pretty cool raid stories where I was in charge, going raiding islands, which was pretty cool. And then the graduation ceremony, which is really cool. I'll talk about all that coming up. Thank you for watching. Take care. God bless.